Well, hello. You know, as we get into the Thanksgiving season, which is one of my favorite times, it comes down to sometimes prioritizing where you can put things, where you can cook things, the oven space you have, and that's why I love the slow cooker dressing. You know, dressing or stuffing, you know, there are reasons to call it what it is, but it's whatever your family calls it. And what I love about this is if you don't want to have it in the oven, if you don't have the space, this can sit in a slow cooker, cook all day, all afternoon, be ready for your Thanksgiving meal, do the work for you, and tastes amazing. So I have some butter melting here on the stove, and what I'm getting ready for it is the aromatics. We have lots of onion, we have some celery we're gonna chop too. So the thing is, since it's gonna stay in the slow cooker, we wanna make sure we give it lots of flavor in the beginning. We wanna make sure it's gonna be well seasoned, well flavored, and have all that because it's gonna have a long cooking time. So we're doing just kind of, to me, this is the most pared down, traditional dressing. It has chestnuts in it, which to me just offer that great texture. And I don't know, I think this is one of those things that you just love to have as a family. I remember growing up, my mom's mom, Grandma Conrad, she would always usually make the dressing. And it always just stressed her because it was either, she thought, too dry, too wet. It was always amazing. But this is one of those things where this is gonna be just kind of that simple, what you would have had with your grandma, what you would have had with your mom. It's really simple, it's really delicious, and it's just flavored kind of with what's the best of dressing. We have some fresh herbs, we have some celery here, we have some onions. So what I'm gonna do is put this onion and celery right into my melted butter. Now, Thanksgiving, it comes once a year. We don't skimp on certain things. So to me, you're gonna use the butter to cook this in because you want that flavor from the butter. That's what's really, you know, there's not a lot of components in a dressing or a stuffing. What there are these simple ingredients, so you want their flavors to really come through. So that's why we are using butter. We're using a good amount of onion and a good amount of celery. We're gonna let those slowly saute, and then we're gonna add in some herbs. We're gonna mix this all together, and the slow cooker is gonna do all the work. I'm chopping some herbs. Now, rosemary isn't necessarily traditional, but I like just a hint of rosemary in it. I ran out to the garden and kind of got in some of these herbs. Now, sage, okay, you cannot have stuff. You can't have Thanksgiving without sage. You need to have it. Now, if you're gonna use dried, you can totally use dried herbs here. Cut the amount in half because dried herbs are more powerful, they're stronger. So I'm taking my sage, I cut it in strips usually first, and then I'll cut all that and mince it more tightly here. The thing is, this is kind of the point. Don't need the stems in there. This is the point. You want all these fresh flavors, but you can do it with dried if that's what you have. Don't let that be a barrier. I always want to say, just because I use fresh herbs, you don't have to. It is great with dried herbs. Growing up, my mom never used fresh herbs, especially at Thanksgiving time. So I'm gonna put in my rosemary that I kind of chopped up, my sage, and then for the thyme, I don't like chopping thyme. It's a thing. I don't like to do it. So I just put in the bunches. I'm gonna let them saute, and then when they're done, I'm gonna pull out the stems, and all those leaves will have cooked off of them. So while this is cooking and sauteing, which you can see that butter is really working in, I'm gonna make sure to season it with salt. You wanna season it well, because this is a big batch. So we wanna make sure that it's well seasoned, and I like to do it in layers and do it in the beginning to make sure everything is seasoned. So I'm gonna let this cook, let these soften. We don't want color on them, but just nice and softened, and then we can keep going. While the onion and the celery is finishing up the bread. Now, what I did was last night, I tore my bread. Do you see that? I like kind of irregular, erratic pieces of bread. No, I use mostly just a bought loaf of bread. I also mixed in a little bit of a country loaf just to give it some more craggy edges. You can use literally store-bought bread, white bread, whatever you have, but I do like to tear it. I think those irregular edges kind of are what make it extra special and give it a great texture in the end. Now also what's important here, I toasted it in the oven. So different than if you just let it sit out. I know some recipes will say, sit it out on the counter. Well, there's a major problem if you just sit it out on the counter. On the counter what happens is the bread kind of just dries on the outside and on the edges, but doesn't dry all the way to the center. When you put it in the oven, it dries it out completely and it's almost like a crouton. So you do it low and slow, you don't want it to brown. And of course you can look at the recipe to explain how I did it, which is on my website, wiseguide.com. All recipes always are, and descriptions, they're always there. So I have the bread in there. I want to get an egg ready. Now, some people kind of think this is like not traditional, but hey, I grew up always putting one egg in it, and I beat it up before So when I mix it in, it just mixes a lot easier. What an egg does, just like it would in anything else, it binds it better. You're binding it slightly, which just offers, I don't know, a little bit better consistency at the end. Helps it hold together to me slightly. So I have that, we have our bread. So let's dump in all these. It smells like Thanksgiving. This is what I love. So I always go out to my sisters for Thanksgiving, my mom, myself, we all get together out there. And all morning what I do is I just cook in the kitchen. Sometimes my nieces and nephew help me. It's just fun. And so this is the smell that I start with because I get this going first. So I'm gonna put in all that wonderful aromatics here. So we have the butter, we have the onion, the celery, the herbs. It just smells like Thanksgiving. You can't go wrong with that. And it's just, you guys, I wish you could. So as I have that in there, and look how good that looks, you kind of just want to stir that around a little bit, just to kind of start getting it mixed together. Now, I always put chestnuts in my stuffing. I would say if you've never done it, you should try it. But you also should try to do and kind of roast your own sometimes. If you don't want to, don't worry. You can now easily buy chestnuts. I put the chestnuts in. Now, sometimes on these big ones, I will kind of just break up some. They should break up pretty easily. The pre-bought ones should, the cooked ones should. I like some whole, but I like some kind of, you know, irregular pieces in there, so it kind of mixes in better. Chestnuts are kind of traditional because they are ready this time of year. This is when you're gonna find them in the markets. If you do not roast chestnuts, try it because they are so delicious. If nothing else, just to eat, get this buttery goodness out of it. I remember my grandma roasting them on a cast iron skillet in the oven or on the stovetop. So good. So once I have some of those broken up like this, you can kind of just mix that together too. And that's honestly, that's really here, the simplest part. This is the stuffing. So now what we're gonna do is we have our chicken stock. Now you can use one from your turkey if you're cooking that. You can use a vegetable stock if you want to go vegetarian. It's kind of whatever works for you, but I'm gonna start just pouring this on. Now obviously this bread is what? It was dried out really well. So at first, it's not gonna really soak in that well. We're gonna have to let it sit a little bit, stir it, sit. And as you can see already, it's just really starting to soak it in because we got all that excess moisture out of the bread. So what I'm gonna do is add this little bit of an egg that I have here. And I'm gonna add this into the remaining stock, just so it kind of mixes in a little bit better even. Stir it around. I just think it's a nice way to get it in there. I'm gonna pour this in. I'm gonna let it sit here a few minutes while I get my slow cooker out, get everything ready. And we're gonna put it in there and we're gonna let it cook. At the end, before I put it in the slow cooker, I like to give it a good little dose of black pepper. I like black pepper. And now you can see it's kind of started condensing a little bit, really soaking in that liquid. If there's a little bit in the bottom, that's okay. And we're gonna pour it right into our slow cooker. I have it on high. Now, the difference in slow cookers, so high versus low, they're gonna get to the same temperature. That's usually what people don't understand about slow cooker. Same temperature with high and low. Low takes longer to get there, high goes quicker. Either way, you're getting to that same temperature. So once you have it in here, I like to kind of just make sure it's gonna present well on top. Maybe some pieces of big bread on top so it gets kind of crusty. We're gonna put the lid on. We're gonna let it cook. Now at the very end, you can of course take the lid off. At this point, if this is too much dressing for your family, put half of it in the freezer in like a container, like a 9x9. Let it freeze. You could just put this whole thing and cook it in the oven. So it's really versatile and it's whatever you want. A slow cooker just makes it easier. It makes it kind of carefree for you. So I'm gonna let this cook. We're gonna come back when it's done. We're gonna eat it. We're gonna love it and you're gonna see how easy it is. I know this is done for one because it smells like Thanksgiving. It's ready to go. And it's just been cooking and doing all of its thing on its own. That's what I love. So you get this beautiful, look at that. I like the crusty pieces that kind of get on top. Now, if at the end you want a little bit more moisture off, you could take the lid off, but I kind of like it just like it is. And you can kind of just go in there. Now, obviously, I don't know if you are familiar with dressing, but you know, it will kind of, as it cools, it will keep kind of falling because it's kind of souffled a little bit. So just don't be surprised if that's what happens. Now, I want to make sure I get chestnut because they're one of my favorite parts. Now, it's gonna be really hot because I just turned it off, but I think it's best when it's kind of fresh. What I love, it's a well-moist one, but not too moist, I was gonna say. There's always that mix between too wet or not wet enough. This one to me is just right. It eats really easily and well without drying your mouth out. The chestnuts add this unique kind of nutty sweetness, but not like a normal nut. It's just delicious. But then it's just well seasoned. You get the sage, you get the thyme, a hint of rosemary, along within that wonderful bread. To me, it's that perfect Thanksgiving accompaniment. It has the flavors you want, the nostalgia you want, the ease of a slow cooker, or you could have put it all into a baking dish and baked it in the oven if you like a crustier top too. So it can be versatile for whatever works for you, and that's what I love. What do I hope you do with this? Well, I hope it's on your Thanksgiving table or menu because it really is that simple. And I think it will become one of those staples that you just love and go back to time and again. It's actually been on my website for a long time, and I get so many viewers say how much they enjoy this recipe and use it now every year. So try it out. Of course, share this video around. That helps me so much, but it helps other people see this is doable, this is easy. Maybe it's someone's first Thanksgiving, and this will help them see that it can be done and it can be easier than they were worried about. So share it around, check my website, wiseguy.com for this recipe. All my other recipes, it is like Thanksgiving Central with all the Thanksgiving ones on there. Check it out, enjoy it, use it, share it. That's what Thanksgiving's all about. I'm gonna go enjoy some more of this because it's good.